Over the next decade, I think we'll see increasing evidence that we have passed the tipping point on climate change.
For me, it's very clear, having looked at the scientific data and looked at thousands of different scientific papers, that global warming is real. The mainstream assessment from the majority of scientists that it's largely because of fossil fuel emissions, and I'm convinced that that is accurate. And I've looked in detail at a lot of the skeptic arguments that suggest, for example, that maybe climate change is due to natural variations such as the sun, or it's due to cyclical variations in the Earth's natural climate cycles.
I did this with an open mind, and I came to the conclusion that while these are certainly factors in understanding climate change, they do not explain the current trend of global warming.
For me, really, the debate is how fast it's happening, and is it likely to create serious problems for civilization to survive? Most of the policymakers have agreed to this baseline target that we should reduce the amount of fossil fuels in the atmosphere to about 450 parts per million. That will get us to a 2 degrees Celsius rise by mid-century. And if we can stabilize at that level, then we will avoid some of the worst effects. Unfortunately, that's unlikely to be the case. We have a lot of new scientific data which has come in the last few years. For example, the work of James Hansen, who is the head of the NASA Department on Climate Science. He has argued that actually you're looking at 350 parts per million as the maximum atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases that is safe, and that actually we need to be below that. And he said once you go past that level, then you will probably go past a 1 degree Celsius rise in global average temperatures. And once you get past 1 degree, he says, you're looking at major changes in ecosystems that by themselves would lead to positive feedbacks between different ecosystems that could then lead to further changes that are difficult to predict. And once those changes got underway, there is a danger of irreversible changes to our climate that could then lead to a runaway warming process.
That was a close one, Guardiana.
You were lucky this time, Kevin.
The problem is we're really on the edge right now. We've already had a rise in global average temperatures of about 0.7 degrees Celsius. This is considered anomalous, and it's outside the range of up to the last 1,000 years of natural variations in temperatures.
In terms of atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases, we're currently at 445 parts per million, which is well over the 350 limit suggested by Hansen. In terms of where we are with fossil fuel emissions, we already are past the danger point.
Do you know the Danger Dodger salute, Kevin?
Aware, alert, alive.
That's right. Now let's review what's meant by the Danger Dodger motto. Being aware means knowing the dangers that surround us. And being alert involves planning ahead to avoid those dangers. Aware, alert, alive.
The official government and international community response to climate change has been inhibited and constrained
by the subliminal policy assumptions that we have seen, with these ideas about the neoliberal political economy being the most advanced system possible. When you have that baseline assumption, then something like climate change is not seen as integral to the way our societies are working. It's seen as an aberration. So rather than saying that we need to change the way our societies are working in a progressive way, you're seeing a push for more neoliberal capitalism rather than less.
In the boardrooms of the EU's biggest firms, company directors now discuss greenhouse gas emissions in the same hard-nosed business terms as balance sheets, shareholder dividends, or annual reports. The reason for this change is simple. Thanks to the European Emissions Trading Scheme, which began operating in January 2005, carbon dioxide emissions are now a tradable commodity.
So, for example, with carbon trading,
Big business is able to invest in some kind of enterprise, say in China, which is probably not very green, and where they're likely to make substantial profits. And by investing in that, they're purchasing a number of carbon credits. The value of those credits is equivalent to a certain amount of emissions. So what they can say is, having purchased that number of credits, that is equivalent to a certain amount of greenhouse gases that we've reduced. So then they can put on their books that they've actually reduced their emissions by a certain amount, because they've spent a certain amount of money on carbon credits, when actually all they've done is invested in an enterprise to make profits and use the image of that investment as a green investment to say that we've reduced our carbon emissions. And in fact, they may well be increasing carbon emissions. So this bonanza of profiteering has been going on for the last few years.
this justifies skepticism. And I can understand why people are skeptical of the science, but the science is not the problem here. It's the way in which the political players are exploiting the science in order to legitimize their own vested interests.
Well, it's a tremendous book, and I guess it was in the Times today, they said that you may be working on being the first carbon billionaire, and in a critical sense, they say that you're advocating something that could make you wealthy.
And we should also be skeptical of the people on the right who are denying climate change, while at the same time taking money from the fossil fuel industries, because they are also just acting in their own vested interests.
Hi, I'm Senator Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma and the top watchdog of the Obama administration's global warming agenda. I couldn't be happier, and poor Al Gore couldn't be more upset. Global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. But let me be clear, despite our successes over the past year, global warming alarmists will continue to push their agenda.
What this means is that we should be skeptical of both sides of the political spectrum, who are quite happy to hijack whatever discourse suits them to suit their interests.
On every billboard, radio and television, on every newspaper and magazine, I want ads in the Boy Scout magazine and every college paper, full-page ads in color.
What we really need to look at is the link between climate change, our dependence on fossil fuels, these vested interests who control the fossil fuel industries, and of course the wider neoliberal global political economy, which is designed to meet their interests, and a very consumerist society, which plugs us into that system and keeps it chugging along.
All of these things are combined and are working together to push us onto this path of accelerated interference with the natural environment. But if we're going to deal effectively with climate change, then we're going to have to more thoroughly understand our addiction to fossil fuels.